What needs to happen for Florida State's football program to get fixed?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles football with me. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. When you place your first $5 bet, you will be given $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. What has to happen for the Noles to get fixed? This isn't an overnight process I'm talking about. When I say fixed, I mean get back to a 10-win or better football program. They went 10-3, and then they went 13-1 the past two seasons. But as everyone knows, they're 1-4 to begin the 2024 college football season. The Noles are a mess. How did we get there? How do we fix it? For the next 5 to 7 minutes or so, I'm probably going to go over some things you might expect with maybe one caveat. So here's my opinion on it. I'd love to hear your take as well on Locked On Seminoles YouTube page, or you can hit me up on Locked On Seminoles X page at capital LL_Seminoles, capital S for the Seminoles. I have a few things in particular, but none of these are going to shock you for the most part. One, maybe a little bit, depending on your perspective. Number one is they got to fix quarterback. This is ridiculous. They're the worst team in major college football with completion percentage. I went over the numbers on the Sunday night Locked On Seminoles podcast, discussing just how embarrassing their Florida State's passing game in every aspect is bad, but yards per attempt for 20-yard plays and stuff like that, like how many they got to go through to get to one, how many times they've thrown a touchdown pass, everything's in the 100s, and there are only 134 teams. The only thing that's even remotely decent is yards, and that's because they're always behind, so they're throwing more. It's a little bit advantageous to get a lead. If you ever thought about doing that, it'd be nice for Florida State to do it, but obviously they're not. So quarterback, how do you do that after this year? DJ's done. Barring something unforeseen, now he did play a little bit against SMU, but Brock Glenn is not ready, and he doesn't have any experience of note. He's played a little bit last year, a little bit this year. They're not going to know where he's at. They can't go into the next spring without definitively knowing who their quarterback is and he's a dude. They're going to have to go to the portal again, more than likely. There's an asterisk by that in case for some reason I'm wrong and Brock Glenn is inserted into the starting lineup. And I did say starting lineup multiple games down the stretch, and it's definitive that he's good, like really good. Otherwise, you got to go get a portal guy. And that's not necessarily fair to Brock, but Norvell is not in a good spot, and that's what this whole podcast is about, fixing the program, and it starts with Mike. He's got to make these decisions. So Mike's got to fix the quarterback. That's one. Two, there's no nice way to say this, and I've had a bunch of people talk about this in the live shows that I've done recently, as well as just the comments in general on the YouTube page. There's got to be some guys get fired off this staff after this season. Recruiting misses are part of it. Several of my buddies around the recruiting landscape agree with me, and some even more so than I do, believe it or not. They're even more negative than I am about Florida State football, that they got to have multiple guys go. And it's just the way it is. There's no nice way to say that. I'm not going to get into specific names. I'm sure some of you had a pretty good idea because I'm talking about it from a recruiting perspective. If you combine it with positions that are struggling right now, that kind of speaks to the language that I'm getting at. And just to be clear, when I say recruiting, I mean high school recruiting, not portal. Those are not one and the same. You must hit elite high school kids every single year. Florida State has not had an elite class in the time Norvell's been in Tallahassee. He's had one really good one last year, but it wasn't elite. They must improve. Last year's class needs to be the bottom, literally, of what Florida State gets in 5 years. It was at the top. So that's a problem. As much as I'm complaining about the portal, there is another situation with that. O-line, D-line, and quarterback. What do they all have in common this year besides underperforming? They have a ton of seniors, fifth-year seniors, and even the O-line, like the left tackle center, they're 60-year seniors. you're going to lose a lot of players. And that means you're probably going to need replacements. How much are the guys on the D-line playing that aren't seniors? You got Marvin, he's a junior. He'll be back, obviously. But Patrick probably leave after this year. Farmer, Jackson on the inside, I don't know. That's iffy. But the younger guys are getting a little bit of playing time. I would think you need at least one of all of the following. At least one DN that's, and this means not just a player, really good players. One really good DN, at least one really good D tackle. Good luck with that. That's super expensive because there's hardly any of those. And you're probably going to need multiple offensive linemen. They've got some younger guys, but they haven't played. We have no idea what Florida State's high school recruits over the last couple of years can do. No clue. They're just buried because they got so many, again, seniors, fifth-year seniors, and sixth-year seniors. They need proven commodities coming in because next year, if Florida State screws up, this staff is toast. So they're going to have to hit the portal, and they're going to have to make it happen kind of like they did in 22 and 23. Obviously, they missed on a bunch in 24. It's not gone so well. On top of that, even though this is where the caveat, and it's like I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth here, but they got to find a way to finish this recruiting class strong, even though they're not going to make a bowl game. That's almost impossible in today's era. They just lost recruits a couple weeks ago. They were elite players that were defensive linemen that they truly needed. And who knows what's going to happen down the stretch. It's really hard to say, but I don't have any faith in Florida State adding a ton of talent in the near future. Byron Lewis obviously was joining the fold. He just committed. But do we really think Florida State's even going to have a top 25 class at this point? I mean, realistically, iffy at best. But they got to do it because they're just going to be in the same boat again down the road. The 2020 and 2021 classes, the first two for Norvell, were disappointing, especially at quarterback and in the trenches. They didn't get enough guys at those spots. They got a few, but they didn't get enough guys at those spots to make a difference long term. There's 20 guys, there's 21 guys, there's our senior, fifth-year seniors, just not enough guys that have made it through to help in depth across the board. They've gotten some, but not enough, especially O-line. Like that O-line group from those classes really didn't do well. They're fortunate to have 60-year seniors at left tackle and at center, two critical spots. But I digress. Last point here. They got to find a way to get some chemistry, just in general. Both sides of the ball right now, there's just a lack of it. They'll make a great play, and then something very similar would be run by, let's say, the opposing offense and passing off a guy to the next in his zone coverage, or, switch with man coverage, whatever, and a guy just goes free. Or on the offensive line, same kind of deal. A basic twist or stunt is operated by a D-line and linebacker from the opposing team. And even though they're experienced, Florida State will fail, and it'll cost them a drive because they have so many negatives. They've given up 31, I believe it is, tackles for loss in 5 games. I mean, you're usually going to have like 1 or 2 games a year where you just struggle. It's part of being human, but Florida State is consistently getting blown up in really bad situations, putting themselves behind the chains, and they already don't throw the ball well. So these are some of the conundrums that I see. And I think that Florida State is in a world of hurt until they can at least partially take on some of those tasks. Again, quarterback, coaching staff, the transfer portal, and high school recruiting. They need the inside straight there. And then to finish it off for the cherry on top, they need some better chemistry. I don't know how that works, but they need all those things between now and January. What I'm asking for is basically insane, but prove me wrong that you're not going very far without those things, because they're going to lose a lot of talent off a team that's losing. It's really weird. When we come back, I'm going to do a little comparison, like with some of the other major college football programs, historically speaking, where Florida State's at, compare some things to try to get an idea of when Florida State could get back towards the top of the college football polls. That's next on Locked On Seminoles. Hey, NFL fans, when you start the season with a big return on FanDuel, You're going to have a blast on America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats and everything else you need with the live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Who are the most likely programs to win national titles? There are different ways to formulate this, but Bud Elliott, myself, and most people will look at the following 18 programs, beginning with 1980 to forward, as teams that A, have been in title games and or won them, recruited at a high level, and especially in today's era, they are financially committed to winning. That last part is obviously an arms race that has started in the last 20 years or so, and it's gone crazy. So here they are. These are the 18 teams that generically year to year can win titles. There are a couple more that I'll explain off this group that could have been and were at one point, but have not. Alabama, Auburn, Florida State, Miami, Tennessee, Clemson, LSU. Those are the programs you think of down south that generally have a shot. Now, that's not saying in a special year like we thought maybe this year Ole Miss might, but they just got beat at home by Kentucky. That's why you're Ole Miss. You find a way to screw it up. Georgia, the other one, if I didn't say them. Those are the programs down south, though, that they're going to be in the recruiting race for top guys every year. They get top coaches. They spend money. The facilities are great. All the things you need to win national titles down south. Further, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, SC, Oregon, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and Notre Dame. I don't think I missed anybody there. I think that's my 18. Yes, it is. That's my 18. Now, historically, Nebraska is in that, but they've had like 6 years in a row of losing seasons. They've lost their cachet. They need to earn it back. In the 80s, UCLA could have been on that list. That state just doesn't support their athletic programs at the state schools. They have no shot. North Carolina or North Carolina State could at one point if they ever invested the way they should, but they haven't got over the top. Washington, obviously, kind of an outlier. They're up and down. They're on that cusp. Last year was a great year for them. Georgia Tech and Colorado shared the 1990 title, but neither one of them has really come close to winning it since then, except for 94. Colorado is sort of close. They lost one game. But there really just aren't that many teams that could win it. So where are the teams that Florida State competes against the most, meaning down south, the closest to them? They're in that race. What have they done since the time Norvell has been in Tallahassee? Where are they at? Well, here are the ones in their records, and just kind of go in order here. Alabama, 13-0, 13-2, 11-2, 12-2 the last 4 years. Auburn, they're maybe the program in worse shape than Florida State, and I'll talk about them a little more here in a moment. But 6-5, 6-7, 5-7, 6-7. It's really sad for a program like Auburn to be that bad. Florida's another Jekyll and Hyde. 8-4, 6-7, 6-7, 5-7. It's amazing. Florida's going to have 4 years in a row where their kids didn't reach a bowl. That should never happen in Florida. It's hilarious, but it's true. Florida State under Norvell, 3-6, 5-7, 10-3, 13-1. Obviously, they've started 1-4 this year. That's not so good. Miami, 8-3, 7-5, 5-7, 7-6. Tennessee, they vacated their wins in 2020, all that stuff with the cheating, but 7-6, 11-2, 9-4 the last 3 years. Georgia, obviously, this is the juggernaut. 8-2, 14-1, 15-0, 13-1. They just lost that thriller to Bama, but they're still in the hunt. And then Clemson, even though they're down a little bit, 10-2, 10-3, 11-3, 10-4. Until last year, their season without 10 wins in a season was 2010, I believe. So they're very consistent. Florida State and Auburn are the two that are the most down of this group. Why? It's administrative moves, lack of coaching, lack of recruiting. Sometimes it's funding, combination. Every school is different. There is no one elixir here. But if you look at that, I mean, Alabama and Georgia, kind of throw them aside. They're at the top of the board in college football. Ohio State with them, maybe Oregon a little bit, maybe Texas. But the schools closest to Florida State, they shouldn't be towards the bottom of that. Auburn probably should be at the bottom among those schools, and they are. But, I mean, Florida State, was killing Miami a couple years ago, and they just been out recruited. That's one example. Tennessee, you got to give Heupel credit. He went out and got players that fit his system. They can score on anybody. He can coach. I don't think they're elite as recruiters, and they obviously have a lot of NIL, but their program is in a much healthier spot than Florida State. Again, Georgia, Alabama don't really count. Miami's got deep pockets with their key booster. That helps, but their staff gets after it. The difference between Florida State and Miami is stark right now, and probably the biggest reason is how well they recruit the high school ranks compared to Florida State. And then if you just want to look at Florida, that's the other weirdo school. There's never an excuse for Florida to be as bad as it is. But right now, they're better at quarterback than Florida State. It's not close. And they'll probably win at Doak, if you had to guess right now, because they can throw the football, and Florida State, not so much. They're completing 52% of their passes. It's the worst in the Power Four is Florida State. So if you look at the whole prospectus of Florida State football, amongst their peers, the teams that can compete for titles, at least be 9-3, 10-2 on an off year, Florida State, except for maybe Auburn, is bottom of the board. It's sad because Napier is probably going to get fired, and Florida is better than Florida State right now. Not much, but better. They got a quarterback. They got two. Mertz is at least okay. I don't consider DJ okay. No offense. And obviously DJ Lagway's got all kinds of talent. So what can Florida State do to fix this? Beyond that, I'm going to ask the people out there to think about some questions next on the show, and just want your perspective. If you want to comment on the YouTube page, that's great. If you just want to think about it, that's fine. But I have some key questions that Florida State's administration, as well as the fans, need to think about. That's next on Locked On Seminoles. Gametime. Have you downloaded the app? With Major League Baseball playoffs getting ready to start, here's an opportunity for you. One of the things that I've always wanted to do, and for some reason never have, is gone to an MLB playoff game. Well, Gametime is an app that can help you get to that location. Whether you're in LA, whether you're in New York, whether you're in Atlanta, it doesn't matter where. If you want to get to a playoff game, Gametime is an opportunity for you to do that. All you got to do is download the app, go in there and search for your team, whatever it is. Let's use an example. Atlanta Braves. If they make the playoff, if the Dodgers play them, or whoever it is, all these different teams, you got a chance to go. You just click on it. You can find a seat and see your viewpoint from that seat to home plate right there on your phone or your tablet. It's very, very easy. Also, you can set it up inside the app. You have all-inclusive pricing. So the first price you see is the one you see at the end. You just got to set it up in the app. It's pretty easy. Finally, they will guarantee you that they will get you the best price, money back guarantee. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Here are some questions for you to think about. It's kind of big picture, and how would you take them on if you were the administration, or just if you want to look at it from your own perspective. Everybody's opinion matters, so take a few of these questions however you like. Where is Florida State as a program in your opinion? Obviously, I don't think much of it right now because I think they stink and they've done it to themselves. But what's your take on it? Do you think there's something else holding Florida State back that is not Norvell's fault? Or maybe they've got some bad luck, and so whatever it is. Obviously, the grant of rights thing is in there. If you want to talk about it, fire away. That's one. Two, does Mike Norvell deserve the 2025 season to get this right? Or does he deserve more than that because of how things went in 2022 and 2023? For me, if he doesn't turn it around next year, I would get rid of him because he has failed for so long in recruiting. And it's the staff that he hired that's causing that. Again, Norvell is in charge of recruiting and he's in charge of the staff. That's me. But what do you think and why? Number three, what does Florida State's 2024 season mean for the future of the Noles? Here's what I mean by that question. Can they turn it around from a perception standpoint to help with recruiting? Do they have enough recruiting cachet to still recruit at a high level despite having an abysmal season? I'm not so sure they can, but it's happened before. There are teams that have great seasons and have mediocre recruiting classes and vice versa. Effort matters, need a little bit of luck. And if you can get a few 5-stars, it can happen. Right now, Florida State's at a tough spot. Final question. What is it about Florida State football long-term that you think is going to get them back in the national prominence? Is it location? Obviously, recruiting's pretty easy at Florida State when it's done right. It's not being done right now. What else is there? What can happen for Florida State to get back and win? When is it going to take place? Those are the 4 questions I have for you. And I'm not going to really go into it any more than that. I just want people to think about it because some of these questions, they're really not that difficult when you just hear it, but try to expand on it. It's not as easy. Florida State is not in a good spot, but they're the ones that made their bed. Now they got to get up and make it work. I'm not sure that it's going to be a quick turnaround. And I hope I'm wrong because it makes my job a lot harder. I can tell you that. And it's not much fun to cover. But as Florida State fans, I wanted to give you all the opportunity just to kind of answer some of those questions. So have at it. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in and talk some Noles football with me. It's a lot of fun for me, usually. Today's podcast isn't the most pleasant, but it is what it is. On Tuesday, we're going to talk Clemson. Their turnaround. Is Clemson really that good again? I don't know. I need to dive in a little more. And once again, I'm going to ask for help from Florida State fans on what they think. And do the Noles have any shot to beat Clemson? It's going to be an interesting game because if that doesn't go well, this season could completely come off the rails. I will see you all again on Tuesday. Have a safe one.